Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Well, goodbye grey sky, hello blue. Saturday, what a day. I could go through various Happy Days lyrics and hopefully people understand why I'm doing that. Because if we didn't have enough with that ridiculous, once again, dramatic finale at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, we also had a little moment with Henry Winkler, the Fonz, at the very end of the day, which personally, as I was tagged in the video of him talking to Big Ange, was up there with among the greatest moments of my life. As someone that as a kid used to watch a lot of Happy Days. For anyone probably under the age of 20, it means very little. Even at the press conference the other day when Postecoglou mentioned it, there were a couple of journalists who had no idea who the Fonz was, which was disturbing, but obviously a sign of age and the passing of the decades and me feeling very old. But yeah, that was so cool last night. It was the actor and big Spurs fan, TJ Ramini, who got a response from Henry Winkler to Ange. If you missed it, Ange Postecoglou said in his... It was a very clever way of turning around the fact that he grew up a Liverpool fan when he was a kid, because quite frankly in Australia they only showed Man U or Liverpool matches. His mates picked Man United, and he, just to be different so they could have something to kind of discuss, he picked Liverpool. And when kind of asked about it on Friday, he said, yeah, but times change. I used to love Happy Days. Doesn't mean I got a poster of the Fonz on my wall now. And of course, TJ went to Henry Winkler and got this really lovely little video that went up last night, and Spurs retweeted it, and he just seems such a lovely guy, and said that he'd signed a poster. If he signed a poster for Ange, would he put it on his wall again then? Can't wait for Ange to be asked about that in this week's press conference, which I'm sure he will. I'm guessing, and this is just me guessing and speculating, but I think that will mean more to Ange Postecoglou than maybe all the Robbie Williams stuff as well, having been a bit of a childhood hero of his. And he even did like the Fonz like "ay" at the end and put his thumb up. It was very, very cool. And he even said fair dinkum, which I think actually has a personal meaning for Henry Winkler, because I think that's the name of one of the production companies he created many years ago. So there is actually a bit of an Australian link there, or term anyway. I love Henry Winkler. He's class. Brilliant in Barry. I even loved him in loads of other stuff as well, like The Waterboy. He's brilliant in that as well, the Adam Sandler film. Yeah, great fun. I just had to go there, to be honest, to begin with, because if I just start again with a crazy, crazy finale at Spurs, it would feel like I was just going back in time, because it's becoming a thing. It's so weird right now, and it's all about spirit, it's all about character, a bit of luck as well, let's not deny it. We'll talk about this as this video goes on. Spurs got their rub of the green yesterday, and VAR closing their eyes in a certain moment, or just having an absolute nightmare. But I think it's only deserved. VAR, refereeing decisions. Spurs have been put through the ringer over recent years. I mean, for goodness sake, rules have been changed after Spurs moments. Isn't like Sissoko in the Champions League final? That the rule was different the next season. I think there was an Eric Dyer handball, wasn't there? Was it against Andy Carroll when they were playing? Was it West Ham or Newcastle? I can't remember. But I remember that the rule changing after that as well. So yeah, I think the Spurs are are allowed to benefit a little bit for once. So that's fine. And also, what is this new rubbish of football fans having a pop at other football fans for celebrating late wins? Where's that come from? Obviously, or even celebrating kind of just anything, like little moments or something. I mean, it's just mad. It's like, obviously, I think I saw Arsenal fans a while back when Spurs beat Sheffield United with that late goal. It was like, oh, how are they doing that? And everyone was like, well, but you did that against Bournemouth. And then I saw some Liverpool fans having a pop at Spurs celebrating a late winner when they did it against... Didn't they do a big thing against West Brom? Wasn't that a draw? I can't remember. I remember all the Liverpool players going in a line, similar as Spurs did against Sheffield United. Football is about enjoying yourself. That's the whole point of it. The players, if you score a late winner, go out and celebrate it. I don't care if it's against a under-8 blind school. Just go and celebrate. Yeah, that would be a bit weird, actually. That would be a bit strange. Okay, maybe you have to draw the line if it's an under-8 blind school. That would be very... they'd be rubbing it in their faces slightly. But you know what I'm trying to say, is that if you get a big, winning, dramatic late moment like that, savour it. That's what football and sport is all about. I find it such a kind of... It's almost like a bit of a bitter, silly thing now for people to say, oh, I wouldn't celebrate it like that. It's like all you have to do is go back however long and find that exactly that club did the same thing. It's a very strange tribal thing, that, and I don't understand it. And it was a great moment. It's another massive moment. Why can't the fans and the players right now really connect again? It's brilliant. And, you know, you got that... the song pumping, what is it? Free from Desire. I can't remember what the hell it goes now. And everyone dancing away to that. It was a brilliant moment. I tried to do a video and absolutely couldn't capture how amazing it was in the flesh. Of just the whole South Stand bouncing, all the people in it bouncing, and the players below bouncing, dancing, doing all of this as well. And it was such a brilliant thing. It's becoming a theme, and that's the most important thing about it as well, is that the players know that they're not out for the count whatever now. And yeah, regardless of what happened in the 95, 96 minutes that came before, they got there in the end. And we can do another happy, positive video about Spurs, which is brilliant. You know, it had so much in it for us to dive into and discuss. This is a long, long way away from that mundane, dull football that would send the Spurs supporters snoozing in the stands in recent seasons. This is something so different. And do you know what? If I'm completely honest, it actually wasn't one of Spurs' best performances this season. I'd actually go as far to say it was probably one of their worst ones. And that sounds like I'm being really harsh, but actually the sample size is quite small. And when I say being the worst, it's still nowhere near like poor matches from previous seasons. I just feel that actually, and I'm sure Postecoglou would feel similar. Maybe he'll say this on Friday. I think he was too busy talking about decisions and talking about how proud he was of the players for coming back. But actually the performance itself, especially against 9 men, 10 men for a long period, I actually didn't think was that great. And I was very much readying myself to kind of write this kind of report on like, oh, crikey. You know, everyone's going to be talking about now how Liverpool held out very kind of valiantly with 9 men and somehow managed to get a point. And fair play to Liverpool. They really did actually play quite well and organised and dangerous on the break. But as it were, Spurs found a way through, and that's the most important thing at the end of the day, because no one will remember, well, a few might, Liverpool fans especially, about the decisions and things like that. But ultimately, when people look back in history, they'll see a 2-1 scoreline, and that's kind of what matters. And do make no mistake, unlike the VAR room, Spurs did ride their luck. They did. But, you know, they came away with their first victory against Liverpool, I think, in 6 years. I think it was 2017, the last one. Was it that win at Wembley? Might have been the 4-1 at Wembley, maybe. And Liverpool were unbeaten since April the 1st in all competitions. So Spurs, you know, however they got there, in whichever way they got there, they stopped Liverpool. And yeah, it's just mad. So sorry. Every so often I get flashbacks to those kind of final scenes and everything that happened, but we're going to discuss little elements of it as this goes on. And yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true. Sorry, I was just looking back at my own notes. I love the fact I'm agreeing with myself while looking back at my own notes. The red card meant that Spurs had 65% of the possession, red cards. 65% of possession, made 602 passes to Liverpool's 281, and 24 shots on goal to Liverpool's 12. And of course, they forced Alisson into a couple of amazing saves from Maddison and Son. That first one, the curling one from Maddison, was just... I was right in line with it from my press seat. It was an incredible save. And Sonny's was almost like a point blank half volley as well. That was a brilliant one. I mean, fair play to Alisson. Whatever, Liverpool can complain about other stuff. I hope they also give massive praise to Alisson for those saves because they were tremendous. That the game could have been wrapped up earlier on if just one of those had snuck past him. Ultimately, Spurs managed to get there. It was through Joel Matip's outstretched shin. I was going to say foot, but it was more shin really that deflected the ball in. And like I say, it would have looked pretty awful had they not been able to beat 9 men. Yes, I know it's more difficult. I know Liverpool sat back and were very compact and organised, but still, you should be beating a team with 9 men. Let's not kind of get too rose-tinted glasses about it. If that had been someone else, we would have gone, how now? Well, did you not beat them? But they got there. They got there, so I don't have to say anything like that. And yeah. And I think it's something you can take so much from that game, Postecoglou can. He can take away the good stuff, the spirit, the bravery, spirit, the character to keep going, the fitness. He keeps saying Spurs are the fittest team in the Premier League, and we're seeing a lot of that. There's no coincidence that they're still going late in games. I know they're against less players, so they're going to have that little bit extra fitness, but we saw it against Sheffield United as well, and they do just keep going. And against Arsenal, look stronger. And against a lot of teams, they've come on a lot stronger as games have worn on. And so he'll be able to take that from that. The players will be able to see that everything they're doing is paying dividends. While also, I think, seeing a lot of the stuff that they'll need to improve on as well, because they are so far from the finished product, which I think, because Postecoglou is playing everything down, which is quite his right to do. But I actually find it even more exciting that they're getting these results while being nowhere near the finished product. Because it makes you think, what are they going to be when they finish? What in the world is this finished product going to look like? Because, they are flying right now. And 62,001 supporters there at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I love it when it's something like that. And the one, because that one, every single fan in that stadium can say, that was me. I was the one. They can all say it, because I don't know technically who the last person through the door would have been. Because I suppose arguably it was them. But yeah, you look at it, and regardless of how the game's played out, how they got there, whether Spurs aren't quite fully flying yet in the Postecoglou way, you look at it and they have beaten Man U and Liverpool at home this season, and they've drawn away at Arsenal. They've just found a way through. We keep saying, this will be the toughest test they'll come up against. This will be the biggest thing they've come up against. And they keep somehow getting through them. They're still unbeaten. It's just crazy, especially with everything that's happened this summer, that Spurs are second in the league. And if they win at Luton, at Kenilworth Road, they're going to go top. Don't let anyone know, but they're going to go top if they win. It's a big if, because this is Tottenham, but they should, on paper, that magical stuff that isn't always something that becomes reality. Does paper become reality? But, they should. I'm going to jinx it, aren't I? They've got a possibility to go top. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, VAR was on their side this time. But they'll know, especially against Liverpool. It really has been in the past. I mean, Sissoko's armpit, Oliver Skipp's head will both be testaments to that. Two body parts that have not been treated kindly by the football, Jota's studs or VAR. It was somewhat ironic, I think, that Jota ended up going off. Being that he probably should have got sent off for that challenge and then scored the winning goal, didn't he, against Spurs at Anfield. But yeah, we'll dive into that a little bit more. I think we probably have to start with the disallowed goal, just to get that one out of the way. There's no getting away from it. VAR just went to sleep. They just were not. It was just incredible. Maybe they were watching clips of Spurs last season at Stockley Park. Maybe they all had a bit of a snooze. But it was a complete and utter meltdown of how things should have been done. If you haven't seen it, Cristiano Romero, it's like his back leg. He kind of swept one leg out behind him, or maybe stepped forward. But he was playing Luis Diaz well onside when he actually took the ball from the pass. And referee put his flag up. The linesman put his flag up, say offside. And even though Diaz went on, it's actually a lovely finish. It was a really, really nice finish inside the left-hand post. And of course, everyone looked at it. We were kind of looking at the image and we're like, you couldn't really tell from the VAR image, obviously, until you actually drew a line, which we didn't have. But it wasn't really anything to do with the line. Apparently, it was just a complete and utter breakdown of communications and everything. I've got a statement from the PGMOL, trying to say an acronym, eh? PGMOL acknowledged a significant human error occurred during the first half of Tottenham Hotspur versus Liverpool. The goal by Luis Diaz was disallowed for offside by the on-field team of match officials. This was a clear and obvious factual error and should have resulted in the goal being awarded through VAR intervention. However, the VAR failed to intervene. PGMOL, I cannot say that, PGMOL will conduct a full review into the circumstances which led to the error. And ironically, the reason I said Luis Diaz is because they'd actually spelled Luis Diaz wrong. There was an error in their statement about an error. But there's no dressing it up. It was completely wrong. He was onside. Should have been a goal. Klopp like afterwards. I was looking forward to his press conference afterwards just to see what kind of side of him we'd get. And to be fair to him, do you know what? I know there were some things he said. There was one thing in particular he said that was classic, like, ugh. But I did actually think he dealt with it quite calmly. We've seen him go in very different directions about decisions, being very ranty and calling people out. But I actually felt that while, yes, he wasn't trying to take the blame away from the officials or VAR, he was, I felt, just kind of saying it was a mistake. That's it. You got what can you do? You can't change it and all of that. And I actually felt he's a little bit more understanding than I expected him to be. He said about that decision, I knew it was onside at half time. With normal pictures, it was easy to see. Whoever made the decision didn't do it on purpose. It didn't take extremely long to come to the conclusion, which was strange, but somebody else has to clarify that. I have nothing else to say about it, he said, before saying more about it. How can a referee explain the situation? To be fair, he was asked another question about it. How can a referee explain the situation? The linesman thought it was worth watching again, and that's why he raised the flag. In the good old times, the linesman should have seen that wasn't offside, as well as you have these situations frequently. When you see it back, it's pretty clear. Nobody did it on purpose. Whatever I say here, it creates headlines, but doesn't help the situation at all. I'm not in that mood. And then he was told about that statement from the PGMOL. And he said, does that help now? We had that situation in the Man U game. Did Wolves get points for it? As in Man U in the opening weekend. Did Wolves get points for it? No, we will not expect points for it. It doesn't help. Nobody expects 100% correct decisions on the field, but we all thought when VAR comes in that would make things easier. I don't know why people in VAR are that much under pressure. Today the decision was made really quick for the goal. It changed the momentum of the game. We scored the goal. It was outstandingly well played. It showed how we can hurt them and beat them. The only thing I would say is there's kind of this line of thinking, oh, because Liverpool scored, they would have gone on to win or gone on to not whatever. That's still debatable. You know, it was early in the game. That would have put them 1-0 up at that point, but they were already down to 10 men. So you can't really then guess what happens next. You know, as much as you could guess and say, oh, Liverpool would then sit compactly, hold on for the win. You could also argue, well, maybe Spurs, jolted by going a goal behind, might actually redouble their efforts, focus a little bit more, and maybe be better in getting behind Liverpool. It just, you can't really kind of make up and guess what happens next. You know, Liverpool managed to find an equaliser. Spurs obviously scored a couple of minutes later, but then, you know, they found a late goal. Anyway, you can't really write, as much as you'd love to, you can't really write a script for a football game. It just kind of happens so organically and sometimes so weirdly that it's almost like people that say, oh yeah, we went out to cup competition and we would have drawn so-and-so had we still been in it. It doesn't work like that and it's the same in a match. Anything kind of variables, it's like the butterfly effect, isn't it? One thing can affect so many other things and then everything changes in different ways. Postecoglou was quite interesting. He gave a really good little monologue. He was asked about VAR and he gave a good little monologue about, I think essentially he thinks it's a bit rubbish and all technology pretty much brought in. I don't think all technology. I think obviously goal line technology I think is excellent. And, you know, other than, I think it had one failing, didn't it? I think that's a really good thing. There is automatic offside technology, isn't there? Which I think the Premier League clubs, voted against that. Maybe that's your version of Hawkeye that just kind of comes in. Wasn't it semi-automatic in the World Cup? I'm trying to remember what it was. It was a tournament where they were using it. But I would say yes. I think with VAR, you get a helping hand in more instances, but I would also say it's still very subjective. And this is kind of what Postecoglou's monologue was a little bit about. I'll read it out to you because it is quite good and see whether you agree with it. He said, "You might have to dig up some research on me, mate. I think I'm on record as saying that I've never really been a fan of it since it came in, as in VAR and technology. Not for any other reason than I think it complicates areas of the game that I thought were pretty clear in the past. But I can see at the same time why it was inevitable that technology would come in. We have to deal with it. The biggest problem I think that we have is that we seem to fail to grasp is that no form of technology is going to make the game errorless. We used to understand that errors were part of the game, including officiating errors. You'd have to cop it, and some people would cop it better than others, but that was part of the game. The game is littered with historical refereeing decisions that weren't right, but we all accepted that it was part of the game because we were dealing with human beings. I think that people are under the misconception that VAR is going to be errorless. I don't think there's any technology because so much of our game isn't factual that can do that. It's down to interpretation, and they're still human beings. They're going to make mistakes the same way managers make mistakes, the same way players make mistakes. When you put such a high bar on something, it's invariably going to fail. So if people are thinking that VAR is going to be something that at some point that is perfect, that's never going to happen." And yeah, I thought that was really good. I think some Liverpool fans got really funny about it, as if he was trying to say, "Oh well, tough luck, you've got to deal with it." And he wasn't really saying that. He was kind of talking on behalf of just everything. And like he said, if you go back, he's got quotes saying this sort of stuff years back as well, or when it started to come in. So, yeah, it's a very similar view to mine on it all. I hate the fact that we have to wait to see what happened in certain situations. I do hate the fact that you can't celebrate goals properly until you fully know whether it's really offside or not. And I agree absolutely with the idea that we just accepted that people were going to make mistakes. It's just the way it was, but it was part of the game. Whereas now, yeah, he's right. There is a high bar set against everything now. Like, it cannot be wrong. It's a very strange and different version of football to the one that was so free flowing and enjoyable. But hey, Spurs still somehow make it crazy and dramatic, whether it's got VAR involved or not in big moments. Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I talk about how a little thing changing it in a game, it might seem obvious what would then come next, but it also can change so many other things. Like Destiny Udogie got a yellow card, was given a free kick against in the first half after Spurs had scored, actually right at the end of the first half. It was the most ridiculous yellow card I've ever seen. Honestly, he absolutely tackled, put his foot in, got the ball. It was a lovely challenge. Yeah, he caught Gakpo with the kind of follow through from his other leg, but that was just kind of a natural consequence, I think, of the challenge itself. And that he got the ball, and it wasn't even like we're going to talk about what could have been a dangerous challenge in a moment. But with Udogie's, it was a really nice, clean tackle. And it was unfortunate what happened to Gakpo afterwards because of it. But the challenge itself was absolutely fine. It was an absolutely, the kind of challenge that defenders are trained to do. Liverpool got a free kick for it. That meant they pushed players up the pitch. The ball was pumped in the box. Yes, it came back out again. But Virgil van Dijk was still up there from that free kick that should have never been given. He heads the ball across. Gakpo gets the ball to... what's it called? Twists and turns, spins around is the word I was looking for, and fires it into the goal. So yeah, so Liverpool in a way, although yes they got their VAR goal chalked out, or a very absolutely fine goal chalked out, they then benefited from a decision that should never have been given anyway, but there was a human error involved in that, and eventually it led to a goal. So it is swings and roundabouts, and you do often find it's the old cliche, but these things do even themselves out over the course. It might not be in a season, but it can be over a couple of seasons. And Spurs fans will say, "Yeah, it's great. We got VAR's help today in a way it shouldn't have happened." But then, does it come anywhere near being as comparable to the Moussa Sissoko armpit handball in the Champions League final? No, of course it doesn't. So, kind of like I say, what kind of goes around mostly comes around in football, and Spurs just finally got a little bit of luck against Liverpool. Why not? Well, if you're a Liverpool fan, you're not saying that, but it's football. It's what gives us something to talk about. Every football club wants to feel like the world is against them. Every fan does. That's kind of the way we all are wired up, and we operate. And it's part of the fun of football. It makes us debate. It makes us gnash our teeth and wail at the skies about how awful the treatment of our football club is. It's just part of fun. Let's be honest. So then we had the red cards. 2 red cards. One for 2 yellows. One for what was a yellow and then became a red. I know, obviously, I was sat in the room. Klopp was annoyed at both red cards. I personally think he had a lot less to complain about with those 2 than he did the VAR. VAR decision, disallowed goal, absolutely complete mess up. That was, ridiculous. 2 red cards. I don't think anything that was made with the 2 decisions, there's that much to a clear and obvious error made in either that you could take away from that, as in terms of the eventual decision on them both. With Curtis Jones, while I do actually feel a little bit sorry for him in terms of it wasn't intentional, and I do think the fact that his foot was slightly raised and then it hits the top of the ball and kind of goes up, I do think that lent itself to looking a slightly worse challenge than what it was. But at the end of the day, it was a dangerous tackle. It ended up becoming a dangerous tackle. However, it got to becoming a dangerous tackle, it became one. And in the letter of the law, I've got the one here. Stud showing making contact above the ankle, which officials judge to be serious foul play. So however it got there, whether he meant it or not, it's not about being intentional or not. You remember Sonny with... he's gone out of my head. The Everton midfielder. Oh, God, he's gone out of my head. You know what I mean. That challenge. Sonny didn't mean to do anything awful to him. Absolutely not. But unfortunately, just the way it happened. Although, actually, didn't he get his rescinded as well? It's probably not the best example. But yeah. So, we all watched it. And yes, you could have questions about the fact that when Simon Hooper, the referee, is walking over to his pitchside monitor, the first thing he sees as he's walking over is a still freeze frame of the contact which Jones made with Basuma's leg. Yeah, I don't agree that should be the first thing he saw, because that was horrific. As soon as we saw that, everyone in the press was like, there's going to be a red. That's going to get overturned and turned into a red. Because you can just see it's so high. And it could have, again, a bit like the Vicario and Nketiah one, could have been a leg breaker. Different kind of challenge, different height, but it could have been a leg breaker. And Basuma, I think, was quite lucky that it wasn't. But also, he should be seeing it from the start of the move. He should be seeing it. And there's some Klopp quotes that I think we'll have a little chat about. I did actually think were quite interesting once he'd got past being a little bit patronising to everyone. I've got it here. Actually, we'll go straight. We'll talk about the second red card as well, and then because the quotes nicely talk about all of them really. Let's have a look. Second red card. Oh yeah, of course it was. I was trying to think of the first yellow. The first yellow was the one that they were all moaning about. Is that? And I was actually sitting in the press room and there were people saying, he doesn't even get him. Doggy falls over his own feet. And I'm looking it back. I'm watching the same clip that they're all showing in the press room, or the press conference room. And I'm like, no, I think you can see his stud hits Jota's knee. It's very minimal. Don't get me wrong. It is very, very minimal. And it is, I still kind of feel it's a soft yellow card. But what I would say is, so yeah, his studs, the back of Destiny Doggy's studs hit Jota's knee as he's trying to motor away. That kind of has a flicking motion, knocks his other foot hits the back of his other heel, and he trips himself over from that point. But there is initial contact as he's going away. Again, you could argue, was it intentional? No. Was it Udogie that actually caught Jota's knee? Yes, I suppose so. But then I suppose you'd also argue that if a player's running into the penalty area, and as the way they're running, their foot kind of collides against a defender who's coming across them, and they go down, it's still a penalty, regardless of whether the player who was running behind them meant to caught them or not. And again, it is so slight, the touch. It's just enough to make him catch his own heels against each other. But yeah, again, I can see how you can argue against it, but I can also see how the letter of the law, it's a player trying to get away, motoring up the pitch, and a player coming across behind him is just, however marginally, but he has made contact with the other player and he's gone down. And like I said, I think if it was in the box, you'd probably give a penalty. If they actually looked at that moment where there is a tiny, tiny connection, a very soft penalty, but still a penalty by the letter of the law. And what I would say as well about Jota is that he did get away. There was an earlier challenge that we all thought should have been a yellow. I think it might have been on Basuma as he was trying to get away. So ultimately, yes, you can whinge and moan about that one, but he probably should have had the yellow before that anyway. But then what was ridiculous, let's be honest, 90 seconds or so later, wildly lunging at Udogie again as he's got away from him because he's lost the ball. Udogie pressed him really well. I mean, and that's just silly. That's just, there's no kind of... I could hear him, so you could see him, his mouth saying, I didn't even touch him. But he does, he kind of catches him on the top of the foot, and it was just silly. It was, especially when you're down to 10 men already. So, yeah, it was one of those where it'll be interesting to see now whether they appeal and whether they manage to get any of... you can't appeal the Jota one, but you could appeal the Curtis Jones one. And then I suppose we'll get a better sense. Because if that stands, then, then it was by the letter of the law... a dangerous or serious foul play, as they call it, whether it was intentional or not. And yeah, we'll see. But I got Postecoglou's quotes on it. He said, "It's hard for me to comment on decisions on opposition teams, but for the first one, Biss has got a decent whack on his ankle, so it didn't look great, and I thought the second came from our pressure. I thought we were pretty relentless in the second half and didn't allow them to breathe. We obviously had the man extra, and there were a fair few fouls, so I think it was an accumulation of things." Oh, that was what I was going to say. There was a suggestion that Jota's yellow card, the first one, was actually for an accumulation of fouls, not just that moment. And if that's the case, and if that's officially what's down in the referee's report, then there's no kind of arguing with that either. Because, like I said, there was definitely an earlier one he could have been got for. But they are decisions against another team, said Postecoglou. I haven't commented on decisions against our team this year, and there were a couple of times I felt it could have gone either way, so I'll leave it for others to decide if it's right or wrong. Then we had Klopp. Actually, we had Klopp first, talk about it in the press conference room. Using his experience as a player in Germany's second division, Jurgen was keen to point out that he would see the red card differently to all of us. He said, "With the red card for Curtis, everyone here probably thinks it was a clear red. I don't think that, because I played football and most of you didn't." A classic Klopp thing, really, that one. When you see it in slow motion, it looks horrendous, but it was never close to being on purpose. It's not important what I think, because my thoughts change nothing. It looks completely different. The game is in real time, but we judge it in slow motion. It makes no sense. It is not my subject today. Whatever they do, they try to do it right, I assume. And I actually think, ignoring the patronising bit at the beginning, I actually think that his comment that is a really good comment is the game is in real time, but we judge it in slow motion. I think that's a really good comment. I think that is something that... Challenges do look worse when slowed down. They do look worse when they're slightly taken out of context of the situation. And, Spurs at Arsenal, the Romero handball in slow motion looks worse than it actually was in the moment. Because in the moment, shown in proper real time, it shows you that's naturally where his arm's gone because he's pushed himself forward and gone down on one knee. But in slow-mo, it looks like quite clearly a hand blocking the ball going towards the goal. So... yeah, I actually thought that was probably the most interesting thing he said all day, because I kind of agreed with it to an extent. And with Jota's 2 yellow cards, he said, "I don't understand. How many games can you remember? 11 versus 9. It just doesn't happen. We were not kicking Tottenham players. We were trying to play football. The first is clearly not a yellow. That made everything difficult. I learned so much about my team today." Look. Liverpool and Klopp are going to have grievances over both red cards, and I think you could argue it both ways. If there had been Spurs red cards, I think we would have looked at them and kind of looked at the two different sides of it as well. But ultimately, neither of them, like I say, were anywhere near as contentious for me as that ridiculous disallowed goal. So as a package, I can understand why they're looking at the game absolutely and thinking we was robbed. But I do think Spurs rode their luck. They did, but about time Spurs had some luck because they often get such rotten luck. One player who certainly was not feeling sorry for Liverpool's rotten luck was Richarlison. I don't know whether it was the Everton kind of background in him, but my goodness, was he going at Klopp. He and Klopp, there was one moment in the first half, I can't remember, it was after a little kind of, it was an innocuous foul down by the touchline. He and Klopp were just going at it back and forth. And Richarlison kind of turned to him and just started going, yeah. It reminded me of Ross in Friends, like, yeah, right, yeah, as if to say, yeah, whatever, mate. And then after the Curtis Jones red card, Richarlison said something again. He kind of came over and was having a pop back and forth with Klopp again. And Postecoglou very quickly went like, get away. Get away from him, kind of as if to say, don't get yourself drawn into something stupid that you end up getting kind of disciplined for as well. Ultimately, I guess Richarlison had the last laugh on his former Merseyside rival. It's mad. I can't believe we looked at those two games. Arsenal, Liverpool, and Spurs have come through with a point at the Emirates, and they've come away with 3 points somehow against Liverpool as well. I did actually think there were moments when it was 11 versus 11 where I thought, Spurs are actually playing really well. I did think that Liverpool had probably the better early chance. Vicario obviously made a couple of saves, good double save. But I did think that Spurs kind of had something about them. I didn't think it was going to be an absolute nightmare game. If anything, they maybe struggled even more so when Liverpool had to really sit back. Yeah, and they did. And I really, like what I'm like. I don't want to try to look through everything with the kind of a Spurs head. I think you have to look at how Liverpool played and give them credit. I do think you do. I thought they played very well with 10 and also with 9 men. They were so hard to break down, incredibly compact. Yet somehow, well, I say somehow, it was Salah being able to break before he came off. They just had so much threat going forward. I had to do a little bit with a Liverpool website ahead of the game, and I was asked, which Liverpool player, the old classic question, which Liverpool player would you take at Tottenham? And it's like, it's still Salah. It's always going to be Salah until that man just becomes too old to even move, retires or leaves or whatever. He is just so dangerous. And there was one moment when Destiny Udogie just made an perfect pinpoint tackle on him. And it just kind of, I don't know, almost kind of felt this pride because it was just another stage in his development. He'd managed to tackle probably one of the most dangerous players in world football. And even Salah just kind of jumped straight back up. It was just, he acknowledged it was an absolutely perfect sliding tackle. Took none of the man. It was so good. And yeah, it became almost like a bit of a training session in a way in that, defence versus attack, and Spurs having to learn how in the world do we get through this Liverpool defence. And let's be honest, Alisson did have to make those 2 amazing saves. That was definitely a moment, or they were quite quick succession, where the game could have completely changed in the other direction then as well. And it was just, it was something to learn, I think. I think they'll take a lot away from it because they'll be able to now see, okay, we kept going, and we were eventually able to break down the team. What I would say is that for me, the disappointing nature of it, before obviously they found a way through it, was the fact that you've got players like Maddison, Basuma and Solomon, who when he came on, who are all incredible dribble of the balls. People just don't realise, some people, that Maddison is so good at dribbling past players. And I feel like when you're playing against a team that have people sitting back and so many people kind of in this compact unit, the best way to do it, 2 things, is you either spread the ball really quickly to completely make them all change focus to another area of the pitch, or you dribble around them. You take 2 men out of a situation. If you beat 1 man, suddenly the other player who already had someone else to deal with has got you to deal with. And I just felt the dribblers didn't do enough. Basuma had a good game, but I actually felt that he could have probably done more in and around the actual box in terms of his dribbling ability. He could have gone past players. And I felt the same with Solomon. He had a couple of moments, but I felt like he could have really come inside into that box. He's got the skill to do it. And the passing was very slow in switching it from side to side. I did think that was one thing Højbjerg actually did quite well as well. Among other little things as well, when he came on, was that he tried to quickly push the ball out to the wings. And actually, it was the winning goal came from Romero. Suddenly took a very fast, quick pass, bypassed Kulusevski, put it straight to Porro. And obviously, it was Porro's low cross that. What's his name? It's going out of my head. I forgot his name. Matip. God, I'm going to talk about memory issues in a moment. In a little bit. Yeah, it caused Matip all kinds of problems. Oliver Skip a little bit behind him. Give Skippy a little bit of credit. He wasn't quite breathing down his neck, but he was in his zone, so it meant he had to make some kind of connection, or he felt he had to. Oliver Skip claims winning goal for Tottenham. And let's be honest, my biggest takeaway was what a reward that was for Pedro Porro's efforts. I thought Pedro Porro was just brilliant yesterday. He was my player of the match by a mile. I gave him a 9 in my player ratings because, and it's one of those annoying things. Again, you've heard me moan about it before. He won't get the assist because it was an own goal, despite the fact that it couldn't have been clearer that his pass led to the goal. He has just adapted so well. I mean, you think back and we were all kind of wondering why in the world did Spurs go out and splash £40 million on a wing-back for Conte, knowing Conte was never going to be there next season, and there was a high probability that the next manager would come in and not use wing-backs. It seemed madness. But what I don't think any of us realised, myself included, was just how adaptable Porro was going to be and how much he would throw himself into learning to be a natural right-back. Because even in pre-season, he looked a bit wobbly. You would have heard me say in these videos and in my articles that there were a few of the pre-season goals came from his side of the pitch, where he gave a little bit too much space to the attacking player. But he's worked on his defensive aspects of his game so much over the last 2 months or so. And when you add that to his speed, his skill, his delivery, he's got a brilliant passing range. I'd actually say he's one of the best passers at Spurs. Maybe, obviously, Maddison you'd probably put in the next higher category, but I do think Porro has got the passing range of many, many really creative midfielders. He's that good, and obviously allied with his crossing as well. He's just, and I think what's really impressive that Postecoglou revealed afterwards is Matty Wells, the coach, who obviously came in to help Ryan Mason and then stuck around with Postecoglou because he's got a very similar kind of mindset to Postecoglou. Matty Wells has been working with the defence, and Porro in particular. There's actually some good quotes I've got here from Postecoglou on, I think it was in his Spurs play interview. He spoke about Porro and Matty Wells. He said, Pedro's been super. He didn't start the first game, but right from pre-season, he's really adapted. Obviously, with our fullbacks, we're asking for a different type of role to what they're used to, but I think him and Destiny have adapted really well to it. They're trying to learn. They're trying to understand it. I think it suits him in many respects because he's such a good footballer. Technically, he's a very good footballer, and he's also a great athlete. You could see today, we needed both he and Destiny to be at it today, along with Mickey, because when you see the speed they have up front with the transition, we're going to need our guys to be really on it defensively. That's the area he's working really hard at, particularly Matt Wells and the whole back four. All the defenders have been working really hard with Matthew Wells, just on their defensive principles, and I think you're seeing the fruits of their labour. And that's really interesting that we got to kind of find out about exactly what Wells is doing with them, because this is something that Postecoglou does, is that he gives his coaches each an area of the squad. They kind of split into these groups of players that almost like teachers or preschool teachers, and like they become key workers for certain children. It's a bit like that with Postecoglou's coaches. He assigns kind of groups of players to certain coaches, and then gives them. He says, "This is a loose structure of what I want and where I want us to get to. Then whatever you want to do within that framework, crack on. You own it." And it gives them this really good ownership as coaches. And Matty Wells, he's turned this this defence into a defence that made so many terrifying passes that, to be honest, yesterday, I was trying to think of Liverpool, maybe a couple of times caught them early on, but ultimately with the press and the pace of how Liverpool attack, I didn't think they really caused Spurs that many problems in the press itself. Spurs did really well in that, and this clearly is Matty Wells' work in getting the players to be able to be confident in passing out from the back, but also organised as a unit defensively. Porro for me is the biggest example of a player transformed. Everyone else has kind of come in and made this immediate impact, and for me, Porro has really, really worked on his game. There was a few tackles he made. Yes, I've got the stats, I think, coming up in a little bit. He made some brilliant tackles, and like I say, he's got the passing ability that when he becomes an inverted fullback and he comes in the middle of the pitch, he can tee up the ball with a through ball for anyone. We saw it for Sonny's goal, didn't we, against Burnley, his hat-trick goal. And he's also got a lovely turn on him. There was another moment where I can't remember who the Liverpool player was, but he sent them absolutely flying in the wrong direction as he turned. He's absolutely got that right back shirt as his own now. Emerson Royale can kind of concentrate on just being a new dad now, because I'm sure he'd love to be playing football as well, but Porro has that position sewn up for the time being. He's doing really, really well. And then, of course, you've got Destiny Udogie on the other side, just 20 years old. It's incredible, that. It just makes me feel so old. But he's had Saka last week, who, after a tricky start, ended up dominating as the game wore on. And now he had, like I said, Salah, one of the best players in the world in that position for a consistent amount of time. And actually sat behind us again in the press box, just in the box behind us, was Fabio Paratici. Fabio Paratici just loving the limelight, despite the fact that Spurs would probably like him to be somewhere in the shadows. Obviously, if you're not aware, former managing director of football at Spurs, currently banned by the Italian Football Federation and FIFA from doing much of the work he used to do. Although that ban was walked back. It was a 2.5-year ban in total. It was walked back slightly so he could do some consultancy work, of which he is doing some for Tottenham Hotspur. But yeah, it's just the fact that he's there, he's like, hey, he's like, might as well be doing the Fonz thing, like, hey. He's just there at every home game now. And to be fair to him, if we're going to give him something, yes, he might be being investigated by UEFA and the Italian FA and all this sort of stuff. But if you're going to give him credit for player identification, there's a few of those young Spurs players that certainly he's got to claim responsibility for, and Udogie is going to be one of them, very much pinpointed and brought in a year away to kind of continue to develop, and he's come in absolutely flying. He's so good, and he's got all the tools. He really has to become one of the best left-backs in the Premier League. He could be a Spurs star for years to come. I don't think it will be long before the likes of, Real Madrid and people like that are going to come sniffing and then trying to get him. And then hopefully, he's got a long contract at Spurs. I wouldn't be shocked if they reward him quite quickly with another bumper contract because of how quickly he's adapted, as long as he keeps going for this, maybe, across this season. But what a player. He's got everything. Like we say with Porro, he's got the defensive side to him, but he's also got a brilliant engine on him. You probably say that he just got to add. He hasn't quite got the Porro final third crossing ability yet. That will come. That's the part of the game that I think he will improve on. But the rest of his game is so good. It really is so good. And Postecoglou, funny enough, was talking about him on Friday. Just ahead of the game, and he said, when I got the role, I had a look at all the players who were out on loan last year, and Destiny was one. I really liked his profile. Physically, he's got outstanding attributes, but he obviously played a different style of football in terms of a lot of times he was used as an attacking wing-back. He made a real impact in a tough league as a young man. Serie A is a tough league. He handled himself really well, and it was one of those where as soon as we got him in, I could see that he wants to improve every day. He's got outstanding attributes, and for a 20-year-old, he's already had some really big challenges defensively, and he's handled himself so well. When he has the ball and he runs forward, he looks exciting. I'm really pleased to have him in the group. And on the prospect of facing Saka and then Salah in successive matches, Postecoglou said, that's the Premier League, that's why he's here. There's no greater learning curve for him, that's the good thing. You saw last week, he had to work really hard against a top opponent, but in the end he came out pretty good. And he can't rest on that because he got Salah this week, and then he'll have someone else, a Grealish or someone else like that, coming in the next week, and he's got to cope with all of it. But so far, he's doing very well. That was a really good press conference, actually. That was our Fonzie press conference. I had a funny moment, though. I had 3 questions, and I completely forgot my last question as I was about to ask it. I don't think it's ever happened in a press conference before for me. The first one was about Bissouma and the fact that he had 3 yellow cards and whether Ange needs to be getting a little bit worried that, he would then at that point have 13 or maybe 16 more games. I can't remember what it was now. No, 13 more games, I think it was, to not get 2 more yellow cards. As it was, he picked up another yellow card yesterday. So now he has 12 games left to not get 1 yellow card, otherwise he gets a game suspension. It's one of those where you kind of think like, you just let him kind of crack on and almost get the yellow card against Luton, because then maybe missing Fulham at home isn't as bad. I don't know. Otherwise, you end up potentially losing him for what would be seen on paper as a more difficult game. But yeah, Ange kind of just dismissed it really, and he's like, I understood where it was coming from. He said very much that's the area of the pitch he plays in. It's going to happen. You're going to pick up yellow cards, but I do think 4 in his first. How many games is it? It's 7, isn't it? Yeah, 4 in his first 7 games is leaning towards the quite a bit mark. But hey, who am I to tell Ange Postecoglou what to do? What was another one? Second question was about Brian Hill's fitness. He said he's back in training and he clearly quite likes him. And also said, like I think I said in the previous ones, that Paratici's injury means that he's going to be a useful kind of extra body in those wing areas. And he probably will, you'd think, get some game time. And then I went to ask my third question. I had them all ready and lined up what I was going to ask. And I went, and my final question, and it just disappeared. Absolutely disappeared from mine. And you'll see, if you watch back the press conference, you'll see me going, and my final question, sorry. And then I suddenly go, Bentancur, Rodrigo Bentancur. It's like, oh, thank God for that. It was just a really weird moment that I, thankfully for me, which was why I was lucky, was that I, in my notes as I'm writing down what Postecoglou's saying, I always keep my little list of questions I'm going to ask, mainly, not so much for a dodgy memory, but more so in case someone else asks something just as I'm about, because that can happen in press conference. You can be all ready to ask a question, and the person before surprises you and asks the question that you're about to ask, and you're like, ugh, you suddenly have to scrabble for another question because either you've put your hand up and they're coming to you or whatever. So that's why I had it, and thankfully I looked down after a little moment of terror and saw Bentancur. And you can see even Postecoglou's a little bit like, I think he had a tiny little grin on his face. It's a weird thing that happens though. It does. It's, yeah. I do occasionally have these little moments where I'm about to kind of say something or think about something or talk. I mean, I had it earlier with Matip's name when it's just not there. And do you know what? There was a little part of me, because my dad in his later years had stroke-related dementia, and there's a little part of me, I'll fully admit, that is scared that, am I going to end up getting that? Will I get it as like an early onset thing? But what I think it is, you might have noticed I'm a guy that's quite laid back. I don't get too overexcited or stressed about too much. I think that mostly comes from 20 years of working to deadlines and newspapers and publishing, and now, matches with crazy things happening at the final whistle when I've got to write stuff. I think if you get too stressed and over the top about stuff, you're never going to survive 20 years in journalism. It's not to say it's the most difficult job in the world, but I'm just talking about that aspect of it. And I'm quite a laid-back person. And I wonder whether my one tiny little thing that might be even like a mini version of like an anxiety attack or something, is when my brain goes, almost like plays a trick on me. It's like, are you, do you remember that thing you were going to say? Well, what we're actually going to do is we're just going to remove it from your head for a moment. And then when you try and think about it, we're going to stick a little barrier in front of it just to really make you look like a complete and utter plonker. That's my hope, that it is that I'm not going to end up with something a bit iffy in the coming years. We all know, because you'll see me in these videos slowly getting worse and worse. But I would hope that the lack of frequency that it happens maybe just lends itself to this being these little moments of panic when my brain shuts down and refuses to give me the answer that's there. But yeah, sorry, I'm going off about myself a little bit there, but it's just a weird thing I think about sometimes. Talking about defence, the centre-backs. Centre-backs had a little bit less success for me. I thought the full-backs were better. I thought Romero was probably the better of the two centre-backs for me. He was quite dominant. He kind of played as like a defensive midfielder for most of it because of the extra man. played as a right winger on a couple of occasions, sort of bursting up the right. And he actually also did an old Serge Aurier trick of being a centre forward at times and no one giving him the ball, so he eventually had to walk back. There were a couple of little moments for him where he obviously played Diaz on side for the goal that should have been and never was, and he missed his header. A bit of a mess of trying to cut out the Van Dijk header across the box that went to Gakpo. But I did feel that he was okay on the whole. Van de Ven. Now, I got a bit of flack from some people, my player ratings, who maybe just saw the highlight moments from him, even when they're at the game. Because this is the thing, sometimes you kind of see the really great, and Van de Ven's brilliant. Don't get me wrong, you know how much I love Van de Ven as a player. And he's actually had a really great week of interviews. He's fascinating. He's got that Dutch, straightforward nature that Martin Jol has always had whenever I've spoken to him. Van de Ven's brilliant. And there were moments yesterday when his pace was a blessing for Spurs. He would race back and make sure that dangerous situations suddenly weren't anymore. But he did, for me, have 3 big moments in the first half where he made mistakes, and all 3 could have been goals. First one was he was turned really easily by Salah for that disallowed Diaz goal. You can kind of see him as a bit of a mess. The ball, I think, hits him on the back of the head or something at one point, and he's in a bit of a tangle and a mess. And again, yeah, it's Salah. It's going to happen. He's a young player. The second one, what was the second one? He didn't get close enough, of course, for Gakpo, for the goal. Yes, Romero maybe made a mess of trying to cut it out, but once it came to Gakpo, Van de Ven was nowhere near him. It was just kind of far too far away from him. That gave him the time to kind of swivel and score. And then the third one was actually Diaz again. Do you remember right at the end of, I think it was just after they'd scored the equaliser, a ball was put into the box and Diaz got a foot to it. And it was very lucky for Spurs. He steered it just wide of goal. And it was Van de Ven he'd got in behind him to make that. So for me, I've got to be a little bit more critical. That's kind of part of the thing. If I'm going to rate people, and I did give him a lower rating. Yes, he did some good stuff, and but I feel like as a defender, if you have 3 moments where you just switched off and those 3 could have been goals, if that had been, I don't know, a Davinson Sanchez, an Eric Dyer, Japhet Tanganga, any of the other players who could have previously been in those roles, would have been harsh on them. And the fact that Van de Ven also did some terrific stuff doesn't mean that he didn't have 3 big moments where things didn't go well for him. And again, people take things in such absolute ways. I had this lovely kind of father and daughter combo of fans who were talking to me on the train on the way back, and they were like stunned. And I had another message from someone I know this morning having a little moan about my Van de Ven rating, and saying, "Oh, he was amazing, he was fantastic." I was like, "Well, I can't just look at it. I can't look at it as, oh yeah, do you remember when he ran back and made that great challenge? Yeah, he might have done 3 big moments for a central defender." And you can argue of whether it was other people's faults or whether he could have done better or didn't, whatever. But ultimately, I've got to judge it on looking at that. And actually, it's interesting. I didn't see it when I did my ratings yesterday because I don't even think they would have been out then. But I looked at this morning to get some stats, and I looked at who scored ratings because they do it based off all of the stats and the data from the game. Mickey Van de Ven was their lowest rating by a long distance to the starting Spurs players. He was actually right down there. By some distance, he really was. And I actually also, in my head, thought he made loads of tackles and interceptions, but he didn't. If anything, I went the other way. I actually thought he did better around those mistakes than actually when you look at the data, because he only made 2 tackles and no interceptions and 1 clearance. And for a little bit of context, Porro had 6 tackles, 1 interception, 5 clearances. Romero had 3 tackles, 3 interceptions, 1 clearance, while Udogie had 2 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 3 clearances. So yeah, I must stress, because like I say, when I talk about people see these things as absolute, people see this as, you hate Van de Ven. I don't. He's a brilliant defender. He's 22 years old. He's going to be, for me, I think one of the best defenders in the Premier League. He's got everything about him to do that. He's got skill on the ball. He's got pace. He's got strength. He's got a really good reading of the game, which is only going to get better, and it will stop some of those little moments that we saw yesterday. And he's got a really great relationship with Romero. He calls Romero boss. Romero calls him Mickey Mouse by the judging of their Instagram replies to each other. And he did a nice little bit in his interview this week where he said about, he thinks that, I think it was part of George Sessions from PA spoke to him. he said that he thinks he makes Romero a little bit calmer by being alongside him because he's a calm presence, and he thinks Romero makes him a little bit more aggressive in the challenge because he follows his lead. And I thought that was a really lovely way of looking at it, is that we just kind of thought about, Romero's kind of struggled because he's had rubbish defenders alongside him. Maybe he actually just needed someone who was very calm to bring that out of him, and having a calm young player is brought out by Romero's the good sides of his aggression. I thought that was a fascinating little bit that George got out of him. I think Van de Ven's going to be brilliant. It's called up to the Dutch side again. Hopefully gets some minutes this time, gets his first appearance. And he did improve. After the second half, I thought he was very good. Obviously, he's got less to deal with. But like I say, the pace, every time Liverpool broke up the pitch, he was there with the doggy down that left-hand side mainly. I think that was also a testament to how good Porro was, that actually hardly anything came down that right-hand side, Spurs' right-hand side, Liverpool's left. I think that was a real testament to him. And maybe also the reduced numbers that Liverpool had. They had to kind of concentrate more on Salah's side. But Van de Ven, we've got to remember he's a young player. He is still constantly learning. He will have iffy moments. Destiny Udogie will have iffy moments. Even the older players have iffy moments. But I just thought that was funny. You know what I'm like with player ratings. I put them out there. I really don't particularly care what happens next because they're so subjective. That's player ratings. We all see things in different ways. But it was just funny that I had this little chat with the father and his daughter, who were lovely, and they were talking about the game and everything, and just how people see things in such different ways. That's all good fun. It's all part of the game. Vicario, Vic, as he's called, he had another very big game for me for Spurs. Rob Birch, if we're talking about coaches doing good work, I think Rob Birch has done a really great job with Vicario, who's already a terrific keeper. But do you remember I said there was this real thing in Italy that one of his faults was that he would sometimes push the ball back out into the centre of the penalty area. I don't think we've seen that pretty much now since that kind of early in the season being a worry. I think he's been brilliant. Like both those the double save he made. Who was it from? I've got it written down. Gakpo and Robertson in the 12th minute. Both of them pushed out to the side again. And that meant that's kind of why the second save was one from a tight angle rather than being one centrally. And that's something that he was very much lauded for in Italy, was his reaction time. So he would often make double saves or triple saves. There was one famous one, wasn't it? Was it a triple save, I think, on the internet before he came for Empoli last season? He's got that ability to recover very quickly. I like Vicario. Having been very fortunate enough to interview him in the summer, he is a terrific guy. He's a really well-meaning, interesting, articulate chap, and he's doing terrific things for Spurs. When you look at, we're in this scenario, it's so weird, and I might ask Postecoglou about it again this week. Hugo Lloris just exists in the background. I'm trying to remember if he was. I don't think he was involved in the warm-up. I think it was Austin Forster and Vicario. So he's not even part of kind of matchday squads, and I don't even know if he's travelling. I'm trying to think if I even saw him behind the bench or anything. I don't think I did. It's such a weird scenario where this goalkeeper for 11 years, one of the highest paid players at the club, just kind of doesn't exist. He's just there in the background. It's very odd. But Vicario, absolute fair play to him, has come in and become the first choice. There's no Lloris is in the background. There's nothing. It's a little bit like another version of the Harry Kane stuff. Well, we're not talking about Harry Kane because the attackers, everyone's scoring. It's terrific. Sonny's absolutely stepping up to the mark as he always does. When the spotlight is on him, he steps up. It's brilliant. And I think at the other end, Vicario has completely not been fazed by the fact that this World Cup winning goalkeeper is still at the club, former club captain. He's just gone, no, it's my time now. And he's just cracked on with it. It's so good. He's a really strong character in the dressing room already. He's become a leader on the pitch. You can see him constantly talking to defenders. I said last week about the little things he did after North London Derby, the way he spoke to Romero after he did the own goal, and when he did the thumbs up and applauded Udogie even when he played a short back pass, which he then had to save from, was it Saka? I can't remember, Nketiah, I can't remember who it was now. This constant kind of this encouragement of the players around him. And there was this moment, wasn't there, when he scored, when Matip put the own goal into the net at the end. Against Sheffield United, we saw Vicario just burst up the entire pitch, sprint, and he jumped over the players and like celebrated in front of the South Stand. This time, actually, Vicario, he was already kind of down on his haunches, and then when the ball went in the net, he did this like kind of just arms that just fell, sunk to his knees, put his arms to the sky, and it was very reminiscent for me of Willem Dafoe's Sergeant Elias, his final scene in Platoon. Just like looking to the sky kind of thing. It was fantastic. And there's a brilliant camera angle. I saw a little video someone put on social media behind him and just watching everything erupting around him as he falls to his knees and puts his hands to the sky. It's a lovely thing. Hopefully someone gets like a cleaner version of it and it goes out there because it looks brilliant. And actually Postecoglou also spoke about him. It was David from, I think it's Gazzetta dello Sport, asked him about both Udogie and Vicario. Obviously, he's an Italian journalist. Very good one. And his answer about Vicario was very good. He said, Postecoglou, it was probably the priority position when I came in because at the time it looked like Hugo was moving on and there was a need for a new starting goalkeeper. You get presented with some options, and I just really liked Vic from the start in terms of the characteristics he has as a goalkeeper, his agility, his demeanour, his character. And then I spoke to him. And he's such an infectious personality. He was so determined. He wanted to come to Tottenham and prove himself at the next level. If you look at his career, he hasn't had a long time at the top level, similar to Mickey van der Ven and a couple of others. I like players who have worked their way up from a low level very quickly because it shows that they adapt very quickly, but also that they're coachable, that they learn. And you look at Vic and he's taken big steps very, very quickly. And he's been absolutely outstanding for us in the first 6 or 7 games. He's been a really strong influence on the field in the big moments when we've needed him. And he comes in every day and wants to improve. And that's exactly what we need. And actually, Vicario put a funny little message on Instagram after the game. He said, that was another very relaxing evening at N17. We just do it so you don't leave the stadium early. Let's be honest. Nobody's leaving that Tottenham Hotspur Stadium right now early because you would be mad to. Although I know there was someone that left. That left before the Sheffield United late winner. Yeah, honestly, you can't leave a Spurs game right now because what's happening right at the end is so amazing, and the atmosphere and the noise and the connection with the players and Postecoglou going around and applauding the fans and his Robbie Williams. They played the Robbie Williams at Angels, which I think you may have heard me say before. It isn't one of my favourite songs anyway. But what's a bit weird is that obviously, I don't know if it's a rights thing, they have to play the actual version of it. And then the fans have to sing their version over the top of it. And it's a little bit clunky for me. It's a shame they can't just have almost like an instrumental version. Because what they did at the start, they sang, when the Spurs come marching in. And they had that terrific guy that does plays the trumpet beforehand. That was amazing. It worked so well. The whole stadium behind the Liverpool fans singing, when the Spurs go marching in. It felt a little bit like their version of, You'll Never Walk Alone. And the 62,001, well, not, excluding Liverpool fans, all singing in unison. It created such a brilliant atmosphere for kickoff. But yeah, I just kind of feel like it's a shame they can't have an instrumental version, or even have is it the Voice of Spurs who did the lyric change, whether they're allowed to use his version. Maybe they're not. It may be that's what it's all wrapped up in. I think his name's James. I met him at the Dukesy's charity game at Stortford. Very, very nice guy. And yeah, it's just a shame. It just all felt a little bit stuck together. It didn't take anything away. I'm nitpicking, of course I am. I was really happy to hear Duel of the Fates at the start. As a massive Star Wars geek, that for me is the music that when they walk out to it, it's like, it just chills when they come out to it. It's such a brilliant it was like the biggest thing about the Phantom Menace for me was just hearing that, and it was Darth Maul and the big fight with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. Sorry, absolutely gone geeky there. And there were some people, when I tweeted that, and some people, I don't like that. And again, it's a little bit like the player ratings. It's down to subjective stuff, isn't it? It's about your opinions on things. But I love that. And when the Spurs, that was a bit spine tingling. That was class with the trumpet playing as well. So interesting to see now what happens in terms of how these coaches are working with the players, how they're dealing with them, the likes of Matty Wells, Rob Birch. We haven't even mentioned Ryan Mason, who clearly, if Matty Wells is doing defence, that suggests that Ryan Mason, with his midfield experience as a player, is working with the midfield. And let's be honest, I'd be interested to. That might be another good question for him, if I can remember it, in the presser this week. Is that, you said about Matty Wells and obviously Rob Birch. I think Rob Birch walked by when Vicario was doing a post-match interview and was like applauding him. It was quite a nice little moment. But yeah, I might ask Postecoglou, what's Ryan Mason's set of players? Presumably, if it is the midfield, hello, they're flying as well. You've got Basuma playing the best football of maybe even his career now. He was brilliant at Brighton, but maybe he's already at kind of a level above that now. You've got Papa Matasar, who just looks like a 30-year-old in a 20-year-old's body, or 21-year-old, I think he is now. James Maddison has reached another level as well, and he was a terrific player before. So maybe Ryan Mason deserves some credit for that. Maybe that's what he's really working on with, and perhaps the strikers as well. Although obviously you've got Chris Davies as well, assistant manager. He loves his kind of possession football, so attacking football. So perhaps maybe it's the two of them that are working with the group of midfielders and attackers. Perhaps again, I wonder if he'll talk about it. I would have thought he'd like to kind of dish out a bit of credit to them. So maybe I'll get some good stuff from him on that. Because that's really interesting. And then you've got Mile Jedinak as well, who is kind of learning his trade as a coach. He gave a big old hug to Postecoglou as he came. Postecoglou had a little bit of a run off the pitch at the end. I don't know whether he suddenly realised that he had to get in for his media commitments or something. But Jedinak we see up in the press box quite a bit, analysing the game from above. I think that's part of his learning that he's doing. But he'll obviously be working. He was a midfielder as well, wasn't he? So he'll be working at midfield. Yeah, it'd be nice to get a breakdown of who does what. I'm going to do that. If anyone you can remind me on Friday ahead of the presser on Twitter or whatever, and I'll try and remember, or on a comment under this, because like I talk about, maybe my memory is going, maybe I won't remember to do that. But yeah, it's so exciting at the moment. I mean, let's be honest, this is a club that, like I said, lost its star player 6 weeks ago, yet at the end of Saturday lunchtime they could be top of the Premier League. It's just ridiculous, and they could stay there over the international break, because City have got to go to Arsenal as well. So if they can win at Luton, Spurs, it's absolutely that game could end up a draw, City-Arsenal, or even if Arsenal win, Spurs would remain top. It's just madness. It's absolute madness. Although, how's it looking? Let's have a look goal difference wise. Oh, they're on the same goal difference. So technically, if Arsenal were to beat Man City by more than Spurs could beat Luton by, they would then, in that scenario, go above them. But crikey, sorry, more Liverpool fans going mad. Not me, just in general. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, look again. Luton are 17th. They had their first win though of the season. Beat Everton. Poor old Guesty. And it's going to be it's no easy game right now, especially a team that's just picked up its first Premier League win after being promoted. They're going to be on a high. It's going to be a noisy ground as well. I'm really looking forward to going to Kenilworth Road, as long as I get my accreditation accepted, which hopefully I will, because it just looks fun, doesn't it? It looks such a throwback ground. It will be my first time there. And, Spurs have got to go there and do it. They can't kind of turn up against Arsenal and Liverpool and then not do the job when they go to Luton the next weekend. It's all part of that. And Spurs and Arsenal are the only unbeaten sides remaining in the Premier League. Obviously, City lost to Wolves. And they're going to have to keep going with this relentlessness. And it was 51st home. It kept Postecoglou's unbeaten record at home to 51 games in a row. That is ridiculous. It really is. And when you saw Spurs had Man U and Liverpool among their early home games this season, it's crazy. It's becoming a little bit of a fortress, especially when you get those late wins. It increases the belief in the crowd as well that it's never done till it's done. And, these big added extra moments. I actually thought when he put up 6 minutes at the end, I was like, oh, is that it? They need more. But they didn't. They got it done in the 96 minutes or so. Incredible. And he actually said a really interesting thing I wrote down about their training sessions and which is kind of why they get these late goals. Postecoglou, he said, some of it is the players themselves, but every day we try, and if anyone wants to come and watch us train, we're at it every day. The lads are hard at it. We train at a high tempo, high intensity. We train it as if it means everything. So they're not just conditioning their body, they're conditioning their mind. There's no comfort zones in what we do. I think that allows them, when they're out here, to know that they've got enough in the tank to keep going. They're not going to run out of energy. They have that belief that they need to keep going because that's what our training is like. I think when it happens once or twice, then it just helps to build that belief where they stay calm in those moments and they find solutions. There was also a really good interview that I think was filmed a few weeks ago with Postecoglou and the Spurs women's coach. Spurs women starting their season today against Chelsea. The Spurs women's coach, Robert Villahan. This is being recorded before that game, by the way, so I don't know how they're getting on or going to get on. This video with Postecoglou going to see in the women's kind of area of the training ground and talking with Robert Villahan, and it was a good little kind of a way of looking at how both of them work, and they're very similar guys, got very similar philosophies. And there was a little bit that Postecoglou was talking about how he used to hate running in pre-season when he was a player. And he's brought that very much into being a manager, that his players get their fitness from ball work rather than, we used to see in the Conte era with, the late great Gianpiero, getting the players to run up and down the pitch. And that's just not really the Postecoglou way. He gets them super fit by these relentless training sessions, which last the amount of game time, or this amount of time that a ball is in play, which will have now increased, of course, with the extra added time that we get played. And he just absolutely pushes them. And every training session is like a match tempo, which someone like Romero must love. My goodness, there must be some studded legs around. Everyone, a bit like Lamella days, must have to wear shin pads. But yeah, and I actually asked him after the game, I said that one of the biggest takeaways for me was not only that they kept going to the end, but they actually found the winner without Son, Maddison and Basuma on the pitch. They're three kind of core key players in the team were all off the pitch and they still found the winner. And all three of them had been so good as well. Bearing in mind, Sonny and Maddison came into the match not 100% fit. They'd only trained, I think, the Thursday and the Friday ahead of the game. Yet they came in and, Sonny, my goodness, that was his 200th goal since coming into European football from Korea. It was another really poacher's running flick. Postecoglou said an interesting thing the other day, something about, I'm paraphrasing massively, but something about the central role suiting Sonny at this point in his career. And I think we can see that. He's really developing into a striker. I'd almost wonder whether, we've seen him raid up and down the left-hand side and all that, but maybe the need for him to press is less demanding on his body than constantly going up and down the entire left flank. And maybe that just allows him to concentrate more. And like I say, the little bits of short, sharp sprinting he has to do when he's pressing, and sometimes he has to go from side to side to do that. But also allows him just to make these runs. And I think we're seeing the aspect of Sonny that maybe because Kane was there, we weren't seeing as much of this brilliant ability to time his runs. I mean, Richarlison's assistant was a lovely weighted ball across. But again, it was another moment where Sonny's run across the defender and flicked it in. Very similar to his, was it the first goal, wasn't it, against Arsenal? Really, really clever run and clever finish. And yeah, Sonny's just been brilliant. I mean, he's only 2 off Haaland now. He's second top scorer in the Premier League. There's every way, every kind of possibility that if Spurs keep going the way they're going, creating these many chances for him, he could have another crack at that golden boot, and I really hope he does. He deserves it. He's just been so phenomenal this season. He really has. Maddison was very good again. Again, constantly running, constantly moving. There's another journalist told me or said that he didn't think Maddison was that fast. I can't remember who it was now. But I actually think Maddison's really quick. When you watch him sprint in the press, he really closes down people quickly, which is why, it led to Jorginho, I think, giving the ball away against Spurs last weekend. And I thought Maddison was really good. Bear in mind, he went in, he's always carrying some kind of knock. He gets just kicked so much. He's always having to carry these little things into games. He could really do with a nice few days of rest, him and Sonny. And Basuma was very good. He had one moment where he did a brilliant bit of tracking back to get back and stop Salah in the corner. It was brilliant, but then actually got a little bit lucky because Salah kind of dispossessed him, and it was given as a free kick. It was there's another one where I think Liverpool fans could probably feel a little bit aggrieved about. But Basuma is just, the yellow cards aside, he's been terrific. So yeah, I asked Postecoglou, are you pleased with the fact that you managed to find that goal without those three players on the pitch? And he said, we want to be a team that has multiple avenues to score goals, and we had to create that because with Harry going, there was a fair chunk of goals leaving the team automatically. We weren't going to replace that with one player. We needed to make sure the way we set up as a team gave us the opportunity to score in different areas. I thought we started the game really well, and so did Liverpool. I thought it was a good game at the start, and then they went down to 10 men. Until we scored, I thought we were really good, and then we lost our way a little bit. We rushed things, overdid things, and were a bit too individual in that back end of the first half, and it allowed them to get an equaliser. The thing about Liverpool is even with 10 men, they were still the same threat because they prey on mistakes, have world-class players in transition, and we were a bit naive, I thought. But second half, we were better. We controlled the game a lot better, played in our half, we were a bit more calm, and probably didn't vary our attacks enough. That's what I said earlier. I didn't remember saying that. But having said that, Alisson pulled off some unbelievable saves, and we just had to stay calm. Do you know who I felt played a big part in that, bringing that calmness to Spurs late on? It was Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. He came off the bench. He came off really late off the bench. And he just used all of his experience and really drove the team up the pitch. He kept getting the ball, collecting it further up the pitch, and really quickly spraying it up the pitch. And that must have been the instruction he'd been given as well, but he did perfectly. And actually, if you look in the build-up to the goal, it's Højbjerg gets it all moving. He's the one that quickly gets the ball up the pitch, and then they start going with it. He was a little bit, some people noticed, after the game, he left the pitch quite quickly after the final whistle. It's not to say he wasn't involved at all, but the players were still out there celebrating and he kind of headed inside. I was trying to look at the goal celebrations. I think he eventually went over there. There's a part of me that when you look at all the photos and the videos of the mayhem in front, it's a crazy scenes of in the southwest corner of Romero leaps in there. There's some players. I actually felt a little bit worried at one point when I looked at one clip of video. There's a little kid in the middle of it all. I'm thinking, oh God. But it was just one of those moments that probably the kid will remember forever as well. But I actually didn't see Højbjerg going over, but I think I found one frame where I think you see him going over there towards the end of it and congratulating everyone. But definitely, I've seen some video footage that another journalist had, and it kind of backed up what I thought at the time, that Højbjerg does come off quite quickly. And I was trying to wonder why, and I think, if I'm putting myself into his mindset, he's probably annoyed that just purely that Skippy came on before him. I think he probably knows that right now that midfield is set and they're playing very well and they don't deserve to come out of there. But I think maybe he'd be a little bit annoyed that when Sarr came off, it was Skippy who went on ahead of him about another, 10 minutes beforehand, and just got that little bit of extra time that maybe he felt he should have been in line for. I could be wrong. I could be overanalyzing it. Like I say, both players ended up playing their part. Højbjerg getting the ball quickly up the pitch and then made himself a good option on the left-hand side of the box. And then also Skippy by just frightening Joel Matip with his mere presence into putting the ball into his own net. For a moment, when I looked up quickly, because I was like, oh, Skippy scored, but he hadn't. He had not. But yeah, it was, I'm intrigued to see kind of, like I say, Basuma's going to get a yellow card at some point. He is, and then Højbjerg you'd think would be the natural one to come in. Just kicked the tripod there, so you got a bit of a wobble effect. Højbjerg will get a chance, and again, I'm not a Højbjerg hater. I do think he's come in every time and done what's been asked of him this season. I think the one that I wasn't at, which apparently he didn't play too well, was against Fulham. But every time in the Premier League that he's come off the bench, he's done very well. So, yeah, I would imagine he'll be itching to head off in January. You would imagine to play regular football. And obviously you'll have Bentancur back by then as well. So it may all work out that way. But yeah, I hope people don't look back on Højbjerg's time at Spurs if he does go with too much kind of rewriting of it, because I think he's done pretty well for Spurs on the whole. I really do think he does, or has. So yeah, it was him. Who else? Richarlison came in and did well. We kind of found out ahead of the game that he was coming in as the left-sided attacker in that trio. I think that just kind of took a bit of pressure off him. It got him back to a position that he's probably played more of his career in. And he did well. Like I say, brilliant Maddison ball into his path. Yet another just slicing defence apart pass from Maddison. Richarlison really did well. Wasn't offside. Played the ball across, found Sonny, and actually did it again not long after. But obviously he was just slightly offside at that point. It was almost an identikit kind of goal, or would have been. Maddison through to Richarlison and inside, and Sonny tucking it home. But now Richarlison did well. He just looks more comfortable in that. I also asked, talking about Sonny, I asked Postecoglou about Sonny because he looked like he took a big whack just before and he was limping a little bit when he was near the touchline, I noticed. And then I've seen some footage subsequently of Sonny on after he comes off. He looks like he's getting some treatment on his thigh area. And then when you see the goal goes in, he kind of almost hobbles over. So I asked Postecoglou about Sonny and whether he was okay. And he said, look, he wasn't 100%, but I had a chat with him yesterday and he was desperate to play. He was going to give what he could, and he did. He was never going to play the whole 90. We were always going to give him an hour or so, but he led from the front again, and he was the one doing the pressing. He got his goal as well, so great captain's effort. He was pressing constantly. When you bear in mind that he wasn't fit or fully fit, he was constantly pressing, and so was Maddison. So were Kulusevski and Richarlison. Kulusevski had an interesting game. I still feel that in the final third he's a little bit inconsistent at the moment. His stats over the course of his time at Spurs show that it's almost every other game he contributes a direct goal involvement. But I just feel at the moment that he's proving really dangerous in the centre of the pitch. Like some lovely runs where he's skipping past players at will. He's got this lovely kind of lolloping, strong gait to the way that he runs with the ball. It's very difficult to get off the ball. But I still just feel that there's times when he's reverting to this, I'm going to cut inside and either shoot or cross the ball when he gets down the right. And I would like to see him, I just said how good Richarlison was on the left, but I'd like to see Kulusevski have a little go on the left. And I think he's trained there a couple of times on the Postecoglou on the left-hand side. So I'd be intrigued to see him on the left at some point and Richarlison on the right. Or if Johnson comes in and Johnson plays on the right and Kulusevski maybe having a go on the left. I'd just like to see him a little bit like Martin Jol did with Aaron Lennon years back. I remember Aaron Lennon was so kind of, you knew he was going to go to the right, you knew he was going to go to the touchline and cut the ball in. So what Martin Jol did was, okay, I'm going to stick him on the left. And he played him on the left for quite a bit, to a degree that kind of worked on Lennon's left foot, and also he was able to cut inside and have a little bit different aspect to his game. And I remember it paid off big time when he scored the winner against Chelsea at the Lane with his left foot, and it was all really because he'd really worked on it and being a left winger for a little bit. And I just wonder with Kulusevski whether, and this was something we kind of said in the early days about him, it was a little bit predictable. But the great thing about Kulusevski, he's so skillful that it's still very difficult to stop him. You watch a lot of these times he cuts inside. He still gets inside into great positions, but maybe someone, they double block it and it's difficult for him to get the pass or cross away. But I'd like to see him just play on the left occasionally, or even during matches, just swapping sides, just to increase the variety of what he does. That's my only thing about Kulusevski right now. Again, 23 years old, very young player. He's a terrific young player, and he's only going to get better and better, I think. So yeah, Spurs, Whew, they are making some strides under Postecoglou. It's very difficult to not get carried away. Like I say, you have a game like yesterday where there was elements of luck, and I think that has to ground you slightly, but still, it is the first win against Liverpool in 6 years. There's no getting away from that. Postecoglou is absolutely not getting away from the fact that he's only 8 matches into his Premier League career. He's absolutely not. There's another quote from him from yesterday. He said, I think I've been at pains to say that I don't have a schedule I'm marking it against. It is what it is. It's fair to say that we've had some significant challenges in the first 7 weeks of the season, and the way we've dealt with them, I've been really pleased, including today. Obviously, you want to put the game to bed earlier than when we did, but sometimes when you score that late, it just helps to continue to build that belief in the group and the spirit within the group that we have that in us to go to the last minute. All these things are not by design. It's just the nature of the game, and I'm not sitting here thinking we're ahead of some schedule. I can understand why some people might have had that in their minds because they're making prognostications based on the information they have. But for me, it's just not of interest because I don't know how far we can go with the group. We just need to keep pushing on. I think that's fantastic. It's a great way to look at it. He's so grounded. He's not getting carried away with himself. He's telling the fans, crack on. If you want to get carried away, that's brilliant. Why not? Enjoy yourselves. And I think the January window is going to be massive. Like I say, there's going to be some players you'd think will head out the door. You'd think they'll bring in another centre-back. And yeah, there'll be players that have kind of lined up. And I think it will be a January transfer window where a lot of players around the world will look at what's happening at Spurs, look at the fun that Spurs are having, and they'll think, I want to be a part of that. You can go to Spurs and you can play some amazing football and it works and it's successful. It's got them up the league. Hopefully it's still up the league by then. There's a great, I don't know if it was Sky Sports, maybe Sky Sports, or someone's put together a little Happy Days clip with all the Spurs stuff. It was very clever. Just show that to any prospective signing because it kind of feels like everything we were saying about Tottenham, how downbeat and how dull and how depressing it all was at Spurs. It's amazing what one man can do because Postecoglou coming in and changing the whole attitude within the club. Tottenham Hotspur feels like the place to be again right now. In every sense, not just for players and everything, coaches, but like even journalists. Like I've got national journalists that I see occasionally. They come into Spurs games and like, this is brilliant. They don't get to cover Spurs that much, when they get sent by the desk or newspaper, whoever they work for. I'm privileged enough to be going there every week in, week out and covering this lot at the moment. Maybe that's my reward for putting up with some of the recent years. But it's really exciting kind of looking forward. And also if you look to not only the near future, but the distant future, you had yesterday Alejo Veliz came off the bench. All this talk about he's not going to get minutes till the second half of the season. Postecoglou chucked him in there. Yes, injuries have helped him get on there. But he got on there in the final couple of minutes. Another Spurs debut, which was brilliant. Ashley Phillips was back on the bench as well for Eric Dyer's ill. That's why he's not there. He's got ill, I think, the day before the game. And then Jamie Donnelly was on the bench. I'm so happy. You've heard me rave about Jamie Donnelly recently. And for him to have that huge kind of occasion of being in a Spurs matchday squad for the first time, massive Spurs fan himself, and to living the dream. And let's be honest, he's not got there by chance. He's worked incredibly hard. He's only 18 years old. Had a really hard-working season last season, carrying injuries and the like, but filling in various positions for the team wherever they needed him. Ended up playing in midfield a fair bit as well. And now this season, he's got something like 3 goals and 7 assists in his first 6 games. He's been incredible. And I think it was a great message to everyone in the academy from Postecoglou picking him on the bench. It's essentially saying to all of them, there you go. Work hard, impress, take your game to another level, come in every single day and attack every training session like it's a match where you're trying to prove yourself to the world, and you'll get a place on that bench. You'll get a chance to be a Tottenham Hotspur player in the first team. And that's terrific. I'm actually going to watch the under-21s tomorrow night. Their game against Chelsea has been brought forward, which is very helpful for me because it was weekend previously. And now it's tomorrow night, Monday night at Stevenage, the Lamex Stadium. So I shall be heading down there and getting another glimpse at Wayne Burnett's very exciting under-21s team, top of the table in the Premier League 2. If they can keep that going tomorrow against Chelsea, we could have the possibility next weekend, if Spurs' first team can do their job as well, of having the first team and under-21s both top of their table. I'm not sure where the under-18s are, actually. I should have looked that up before I came out with that. But yeah, no, delighted for Jamie Donnelly. He will get his Spurs debut at some point. It will come. He's on the right road. He really is. But yeah, no, it should be a good game against Chelsea tomorrow. I don't know whether Veliz... You'd think Jamie Donnelly will play. I would know whether Veliz... Postecoglou said Veliz was going to get more under-21 minutes. He only got a couple of minutes yesterday, so it may be the case that they feel that it's beneficial for him to get maybe an hour in his legs potentially in an under-21s game. But, it's not just those two. You've got Alfie Dorrington I'm looking forward to see. Phillips might play. Potentially again, Santiago's playing very well. Will Lancashire's playing very well. Judson St Bell against his old team as well. It'll be exciting to see. So now I'm looking forward to that. As for the first team, obviously now you've got Luton away, Fulham at home, Palace at Selhurst Park, before a certain Mauricio Pochettino brings his Chelsea side to N17. There's a real opportunity, really, when you look at those fixtures for Spurs to really build more momentum. It's quite scary. If they can... Look, there's going to be hiccups. They're going to come. It's a young team. We know they're going to come. But if in this little period they can build up some momentum behind them, everyone's going to get very overexcited. Because this is Tottenham. It's not Tottenham as we know it either. Hey, even the Fonz is giving it a big thumbs up. So it's looking good at the moment. Little brief loan roundup before I go. Troy Parrott, I put up on Twitter. He scored a lovely goal today, a winning goal for Excelsior Rotterdam against Sparta Rotterdam late in the game. I think the 94th minute. It's a terrific pass into his path, and he kind of hits it on the half volley. It's a lovely goal in front of the home crowd to win the derby for them. Back-to-back goals for Troy as well, so he's doing very well for himself out there in the Eredivisie. That's what you want to see. As I've said about Troy, everything now was about him being a regular goal scorer. He was building up the rest of his game. It was just about showing that he's a striker and he can score goals like we know he can with his finishing. So great for him. Dane Scarlett got more minutes for Ipswich. Obviously, they're flying Ipswich, top of the table. And he came on in their latest game, only about the last 15 minutes or so, but it's so much experience for him to play in a team that is up there at the top of the table. It's a bit like Skippy had at Norwich. Obviously, Skippy was starting, but I think Dane will get his chances. I said last time, I was thinking he could play in a Carabao Cup game, but of course he couldn't. He played for Spurs. Came off in the second half, didn't he, against Fulham. But yeah, so more minutes for Dane. Alfie Devine got a late assist in midweek as Port Vale went through in the fourth round of Carabao Cup. I think they make history. I think that maybe is the first time they've been in the fourth round of the League Cup, possibly. Alfie Devine got an assist that day, and then I think he only played the first 45 minutes yesterday for Port Vale in the league. They lost at Bolton to Bolton at home. Sergio Reguilon's injured at the moment, so he's missing out for United, having been very good for United. A lot of the United reporters I've spoken to saying he's their best player right now. Tongion Dembele, unused sub for Galatasaray. It's not started so well for him there. Davinson Sanchez played the whole game for them. I know he's not on loan, but we'll talk about Big Dav every so often because I'm looking at their stuff for Tungi anyway, so I might as well. Joe Rodon was an unused sub after coming back from his suspension for Leeds. Leeds lost 3-1 at Southampton, so I'd imagine Joe will be back in the starting lineup as he had been previously. Jed Spence, he's got his knee injury, which is a lateral collateral ligament injury. I managed to mangle all three words together there in his knee. He's in total is going to be out for 8 weeks, so he's got a while left. Japhet Tanganga has also got a few knee issues. He still hasn't played yet for Augsburg. But yeah, plenty of stuff going on with the loan players that are getting minutes. And I think that's everything. I think we've covered everything. We've had contentious decisions. We've had the Fonz. We've had Postecoglou's way. We've had Klopp whinging. Understandably, I think, in some circumstances. And Spurs still unbeaten, second in the table, with the opportunity at lunchtime on Saturday to go top if they will take it. We know Spurs don't often like to take gifts that are given to them generously. They often will throw them in a hedge or something and absolutely decide to go in a different direction. But hopefully this is a different Tottenham. Postecoglou's Tottenham. And we'll see them go top. And my goodness, that would be exciting. It would just be a little visual representation of where Spurs are hoping to go. You know, is that the quarter mark in the season? Almost the quarter mark of the season. You know me. I'm going to get overexcited whether they're second or first, quite frankly, because it's fun. It's fun to watch Tottenham again and report on them, and it's great. Right, I'm going to head off now. I'm trying to think if there's going to be a midweek video. We'll see what happens. We're still waiting for Director of Football or Technical Director, as I think they'll be called, announcement. I think that'll That'll come in the near future. Scott Munn is very much in place now as the Chief Football Officer, so you imagine that will be sooner rather than later. If something along those lines breaks, then we'll have a little chat maybe about that in midweek. And if it doesn't, then the next one will be after the Luton game. I'm at the Luton game and I'm at the Bills game, the NFL game at the stadium. Get my little bit of NFL when it comes over here, and it kind of helps me because then I can write bits and pieces about the stadium, how it works in NFL thing, and a future franchise, and how the money comes in and where that money goes back to the first team for the football, and all of this sort of stuff. So there's an aspect of enjoying and loving my NFL, and also an aspect of seeing how it all operates in the big thing that is Tottenham Hotspur, and how it eventually affects Postecoglou Spurs as well. So busy weekend next one for me. So there you go. Right, I'm going to head off and enjoy the rest of my Sunday, and I hope you all do the same yourselves. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.